Okay, so there's a huge new development in the peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. And right at the heart of it is a new, really high-stakes security offer from the United States that could, change absolutely everything. Let's break down what's actually in it and why it's such a big deal. And look, to really get what's at stake here, you just have to hear these words from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He's been crystal clear. Without some kind of real, solid security guarantee, any peace deal is it's just hitting the pause button, not stopping the conflict for good. So what is this big breakthrough offer anyway? Well, after months and months of some really intense U.S.-led negotiations, it looks like something concrete is finally on the table. This all kicked off just a few days back, on December 28th. That's when President Trump hosted President Zelenskyy at his Florida resort. And after that meeting, Trump came out saying the two sides are closer than ever before to getting a deal done. Now, obviously, this meeting didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's really the latest chapter in a long, painful story that started way back in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea, got way, way worse in 2022 with a full-scale invasion, and has now led us to this really critical moment for diplomacy. All right, let's get to the heart of it. What's the core of this whole proposal? It really all boils down to one thing, a security guarantee, and it has a very, very specific timeline attached to it. And here it is, the big number everyone's talking about, 15 years. That's how long the United States is offering to commit to Ukraine's security. It's basically the cornerstone of this entire peace plan. But, and this is a big but, that 15-year number shows a pretty massive gap between what's being offered and what's wanted. While the U.S. is putting 15 years on the table, Ukraine is pushing for a 50-year commitment. President Zelenskyy feels that's what's truly needed to make sure this never, ever happens again. You might be hearing this term security guarantee thrown around. So what does it actually mean? Well, think of it like a formal pledge. It's a promise from one or more countries to step in and do something if another nation's safety is at risk. It's designed to have real teeth. Now, we don't know every single detail. A lot of this is still under wraps. But here's what we do know is included. There's a plan for how to monitor the peace. There's talk of a presence of international partners on the ground. And this is absolutely crucial. It has to get approved by the U.S. Congress. Oh, and President Trump has hinted that maybe, just maybe, that 15-year term isn't totally set in stone. A deal this massive isn't just about two people in a room. It involves a whole bunch of different players, and every single one of them has their own goals and their own red lines. So let's take a look at who's at the table and where they all stand. And this table really lays it all out, doesn't it? You've got Trump, who's feeling optimistic, but is also being cautious, saying it could all still fall apart. Then there's Zelenskyy, who sees this as just a starting point and is already talking about a national referendum. Over in Russia, Putin is sticking to his hard line, absolutely no NATO troops in Ukraine. And meanwhile, you have France's President Macron, who's working to get all the other allies on the same page about what they're willing to contribute. Okay, so that's the good news. But now we have to talk about the really tough part. Because even with all this progress, there are some major hurdles still in the way. And we're not talking about small details here. These are fundamental problems that could sink the whole thing. Yeah, they're hitting some serious roadblocks. For starters, they still can't agree on how and when troops would pull back. The future of that huge Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is another massive question mark. And of course, there's Russia's absolute refusal to even consider a NATO presence. That's a major, major sticking point. And remember that referendum we mentioned? Well, it's stuck in this classic catch-22 situation. For Ukraine to hold a proper vote, they need a ceasefire for at least 60 days. Makes sense, right? But Moscow says it's not going to agree to any truce until a full peace deal is already signed. So you can see how that creates a pretty tricky loop. So with all these challenges and all these players in the mix, where do things go from here? What happens next? What's the path forward? Okay, here's what to watch for. First up, there's going to be a super high-stakes phone call, probably between Trump and Putin. Then, coming up in early January, Ukraine's allies are all meeting in Paris to figure out exactly what their roles will be. And if, and that's a big F, a deal actually makes it through all of that, it'll face its final hurdle, a national vote in Ukraine. So at the end of the day, it all boils down to this one big question. This 15-year offer, it's the most solid proposal we've seen in years. But is it a real path to a lasting peace? Or is it just a way to pause a conflict that's far from over? What happens in the next few weeks is going to tell us everything.